Hello, and welcome to our third and final video regarding the cloud services tools for SOLIDWORKS. My name is Kaylee Gonzalez. I'm an application expert with MLC CAD Systems, and I've been guiding you through our webinar series. Now, if you have not seen the first two webinars, you can check them out at any time. They're currently posted on MLC's YouTube channel and website. The first webinar, we covered the share and markup functionality, including how to set that up, as well as several examples. The second webinar, we focused on storing files directly inside of 3D Experience and more everyday revision control of those files. Today's webinar, our third section, we're going to go a little bit deeper into data management and take a look at some specific apps that can allow us to track changes and automate approvals. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into webinar number 3, discussing manage and controlling files. The 3 apps that we're going to be focusing on today is the issue management app, change execution, and route management apps. These are all available through the industry innovator role. First item we're going to talk about is the issue management. This is going to allow any user at your company to submit an issue that they find. By submitting an actual issue, this is an object that 3D Experience uses to track, prioritize the issue, and of course we can assign that to additional users as well. From there, we'll also take a look at a change action. Change actions are created through Change Execution app, and we can track and manage changes to specific CAD files. What we're also going to see is we can work under a change action even when inside of SOLIDWORKS. This is going to automatically detect changes and apply them to the change action, so we have some automation there and great visibility of keeping everything up to date. Under our route management, we're going to take a look at how we can create a route, and we'll also take a look at route templates. Now, in general, a route is a type of object that SOLIDWORKS 3D Experience uses in order to automate processes such as approvals and reviews. We're going to see how we can use it to help with formalizing and standardizing approvals. We're also going to take a look at route templates. Route templates do allow you to create predefined approval processes that you can then use at any time going forward, and they will be repeatable to everybody on your team. Before we go ahead and start our example today, I want to first go back into my dashboard in my web interface. I want to make sure that I have a tab set up there with these 3 specific apps easily available to me. This will just kind of streamline certain sections because these 3 apps are very interconnected, so we want to make sure that they're going to be easily accessible. Now, we had originally created inside of our webinar series a dashboard that I had just called Kaylee's dashboard. This is containing my files and folders tab inside of my interface. Now, I can continue to further customize my dashboard really whenever I want. And what I'm going to do next is simply create a new tab up at the top and then drag and drop my specific apps into that tab. I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I'm going to call this Issues, Changes, and Approvals. You can name it something a bit smaller, but for now we'll leave that as is. And this will create a blank tab. Next, going into my Compass and my Industry Innovator role, I will have access to the 3 apps we're going to take a look at today. The first one is going to be the Issue Management app. Again, left-click and dragging that into my new tab will allow me to start customizing how these are going to look. So I'm also going to drag in my Change Execution and Route Management apps. These come in as widgets that we can then expand, and once we're done getting kind of a basic setup of how we want this to look, I can go up into my tab itself and just choose the Fit option, and that will automatically fit everything directly into my tab. As we go through, just a quick, simple little tip here is at the top of all of these specific apps in the tab, there is like a white space next to the title. And if you double click on that, it actually expands the app to fill in the entire screen. And if you double click it again, it minimizes it. This is just a really easy kind of everyday productivity tip that you'll see me using in some of the upcoming steps. So now that our dashboard has been customized and those specific apps are ready to go, let's discuss what we're going to be doing in the first section. We are going to talk about issue management first. We're going to see how anybody at the company can report an issue. This isn't something that's specific to SOLIDWORKS users. Anyone can really accomplish this. Once the issue has been created, we're going to take a look at some of the specific settings on the issue itself. We can assign a priority level to the issue, a due date, as well as any other contributing people or files that would need to be tracked with the issue. We are going to take special attention on how CAD files are attached to issues. There is some automation here as well that we'll take a look at. So now that we have an idea of where we're going to start, let's go ahead and jump back into our web interface, and we're going to take a look at how we can submit an issue. Inside of my web interface, I'm now looking at the Files and Folders tab. This is giving me my bookmark editor, which is my file and folder structure in 3D Experience. That's my list of files on the left, and on the right is my 3D Play application. The 3D Play application is one of the more basic viewers available on the platform. Anyone with access to the platform has access to 3D Play. This is giving me the ability to pan, zoom, and rotate just inside of a web browser. I don't need SOLIDWORKS for any of that type of information. Now, if I'm looking at this model, I may actually see that in this section, it looks like the hardware and that plate are actually overlapping geometry. I'm not really seeing it on the other side as I look, but I'm definitely seeing something that looks like it should at least be looked into a little bit more. I can do some very basic annotations and markups inside of 3D Play, but they're going to be very basic and not necessarily captured in the same way. I also can't establish an issue from 3D Play. But what I can do is I can just swap out 3D Play for my 3D Markup app. Just by clicking on 3D Markup, those two apps just switch out and all of my orientation stays the same. Once I'm inside of my 3D Markup app, I see a different action bar along the bottom with a lot more functionality. My 3D Markup app, again, is a 3D viewer, but it is integrated more into the data management portion of 3D Experience. Notice from here, I can actually generate an issue directly from 3D Markup and create a change action from 3D Markup. However, they're both grayed out right now. The reason why they're both grayed out is because I haven't actually gone through and created my first markup. So as I create a markup, one of the first things I'm going to do is add my title, and then I can add a description. This is kind of what I'm seeing, such as there is an overlap between components that would need to be addressed. Once the markup is created, now I can add some additional context to this. For example, I can draw a circle or a shape around what I'm looking at, add color, size, change the line style. I have quite a bit of customization I can do here. I can also make use of my text to click on the components, and 3D Markup will automatically give me the component name. This is such an easy, fantastic tool because whoever receives this is going to know exactly which files look to be affected, and it will help them in searching for them, locating them, and really getting to the issue faster as opposed to having to do a lot of searching and evaluating. Once we have completed adding all of our information, now I can go to my markup tab and I can choose to generate an actual issue. Once the issue has been started, notice that my title from my markup has been pulled in, as has the description. So all of that has been set from the markup that we created. The next item here is a recommendation for a resolution. Now, there could be a number of recommendations or a number of reasons why this geometry is overlapping. We could make a recommendation to add a chamfer to the hole or a countersink hole. We could take a look at the actual hardware. Maybe there's an issue there or that the hole sizes are wrong. There's a variety of items to take a look at. We can also set a priority level. We can set priority to low, medium, or high, and set a due date. If we need this done very quickly, we could set a due date for tomorrow. We could also set a due date for a little bit further ahead, depending on how critical this is. Once we've established our basic information, our priority, and our due date, I can also take a look at the Contents tab up at the top. The Contents tab has my assembly moto knee already associated in this specific issue. This happened automatically. There was nothing extra that we had to do to accomplish this. Because I was viewing the moto knee assembly in 3D markup when I created all this content, 3D Experience automatically attached and included that as an affected item. The markup itself is also included. So whoever receives this to make the changes is going to have access to the markup that I created just directly inside of the issue. Again, this is really going to reduce the amount of searching and digging that users have to have in order to find this information. Now, we could also add existing attachments or documents if you have spec sheets or other forms that needed to be included. In the Members tab, we have an option to include other interested parties on the issue. The owner is whoever creates the issue. We could also add a coordinator. Coordinator has the same responsibilities as the owner, other than they don't necessarily have the permission to delete items. As far as assigning this to a specific person, if you don't know who to assign it to, you don't have to necessarily fill these in. But if you know who the engineer is that was working on this, you could search for that person and assign it to another individual, or you could go ahead and just assign it to yourself if you know that you have access to make the change. In this case, I'm going to assign it to me. And you have the option that you could also include contributors and informed users. Contributors are those who can view and evaluate the issue. They can maybe add comments, but they're not necessarily making changes to the files or making changes to the issue itself. And then an informed user is really just someone who can view the issue as well, but they also will receive notifications as to the status of the issue if it's pertinent to them. So once I have all of my settings for this issue completed, I'm going to click Start. This will accept all the information, and in a couple of moments, the issue itself will be created. Whoever is the assignee for the issue would receive a notification. Because I assigned it to myself, you don't really get notifications to yourself. But if I go into my Issues Management app, I can see that the issue is currently there. I can see all the same information, the maturity state, the description, the priority, who it's assigned to, if it's myself and another individual, and who the owner is. I can also see the files directly inside of the issue. Now, if I was not the person who created the issue, this is such a huge convenience factor because I can just open these directly within SOLIDWORKS from the issue and not have to figure out where the files are or where they're residing. I can double click on the issue to see even more information. A summary of all the properties is there, as is the contents. That's showing again those same files. Any attachments, from here I can access and see that markup for additional information on what was circled and the component names. If there's any comments, I can also see the relations. So the relations are all of these external references between the issue, attachments, models, assignees, any type of context. This has all been set up automatically through 3D Experience. And of course, not only do we have all of the relations and related items summarized for us, but we also have a history of this particular issue. The history will start getting automatically populated with more information as the issue is resolved. So with our issue management, we saw how anyone can create an issue. This isn't even specific to SOLIDWORKS at this point. We haven't used SOLIDWORKS at all. Anyone with access to the viewer apps can create an issue. The CAD files we also saw were automatically attached and included to the issue, as were a series of other referenced items such as the markup itself. So this is really compiling all of the information in just a real simple location. Anyone who is attached to the issue will then also receive notifications, not only that it was created, but they'll also receive notifications when other changes have been made throughout that process. We have actually documented that there is an issue in the model. The next step that we want to do is establish a change action to resolve the issue. So we'll initiate and set up a change action in this next section. We will make sure that the issue and the change actions are attached to each other because they will be linked as a reference, and we will make changes to the model using the work under in order to automatically capture the realized changes of the change action itself. So we're going to be working a little bit more in SOLIDWORKS in this upcoming session. So with the issue having been submitted and completed, one of the first things that we would want to do once it's been assigned to us is to really verify if this is indeed an issue from a SOLIDWORKS geometry perspective. We would want to verify this just to make sure it's not just something that someone saw in a viewer and maybe was a graphical item. Now we can open files directly from our issues, either from the management app or from this contents tab, and we can right click and choose to design with SOLIDWORKS. This will open the referenced assembly directly in SOLIDWORKS CAD. Even if SOLIDWORKS isn't launched, that will launch your product and open your files as you see here. Once my models have fully loaded, I'll be able to start utilizing SOLIDWORKS. And I'm going to go into my Evaluate tab and go under my interference detection. Instead of running the interference on the entire model, I'm really going to focus on the 3 components that were inside of the markup just to verify and grab more information as far as what is contained in the issue. Once I click Calculate, we do see there are 2 interferences here. We see not only a smaller red section, but also the red cylinders, which actually indicates that there is probably a diameter issue between the hardware and the plate. We have not only a potential diameter issue, but we can also see with the transparent files that there is some overlap. This is due partially because the plates are at an angle where the hardware is not. So there is a bit of geometry overlap there. Now that I've verified this, I'm going back into my issue and I'm going to reopen the 3D markup so I can take a look at the markup and access the app. One of the main reasons why I'm doing this here is because I can reference the exact same markup to generate my change action. Doing this will help the issue and the change actions be automatically linked through this markup. It's going to essentially link everything together with a reference. I'll choose a change action title, add a description, and I can add a severity as well. Being consistent with the severity level of the issue, I'm going to leave this as a high severity. I'm also going to set a due date, and this will be the same as my issue. Once my change action is done, my issue should also be resolved. Now I have a couple additional options. I could save this as a draft. That means that I wouldn't necessarily be working under it and I wouldn't have an option to do that. So I'm going to click on Begin Work because my next step is to make my CAD changes and reference the change action during the CAD modifications. Once I click on the Begin Work, The change action will fully generate, and we'll be able to see this in a couple of locations. I will be able to refresh my change execution app. Once 3D Experience has been able to index, I can then click on the My Change Actions to see what I have just created. We can take a closer look at the specific settings of the change action by expanding my change execution app and a closer look at this settings. We'll see a couple of tabs here. One is a Members tab and one is a Proposed Changes. Now the Members tab will show that I'm the owner and this is assigned to me. I could add additional engineers or additional people as approvers, owners, assignees if this is a little bit more involved. Under the Proposed Changes, this is providing me with what this change action will do as an end result. So it's going to change the maturity state of the changed files to a released state. It'll do that automatically. Right now, under Realize Changes, there is nothing listed there. I haven't made my changes yet, but once I do, we will see any change files populate in this screen. And I also currently do not have any approvals in progress because I don't have any changes made on my files. Now I can add additional activities into my proposed changes. In this case, I just want this to be changed to a release state. I can see now in my Issues Management app that the change action is nested there as well. As I mentioned, those two are now going to be linked. I see that a route has appeared in my Route Management app at the bottom. That does appear automatically because it is part of the change action. It automatically starts a route for you. We're going to talk more in depth about routes and using them for approvals, but I want to show you what this route is going to look like having just been generated, because at this point in time, if we wanted to make any modifications to the route, now would be a good time to do that. The first item in the route is actually the tasks. The tasks is really where you're going to go to establish how things get approved. So this is a very simple one-step approval. It's going to be assigned to me. Once I approve something, then the change action will go through and change the state on those files. Now, I just added the proper due date. I could also make additional edits at this time as far as adding a second approver or multiple steps if I needed to. Under the content, notice that I see that I have my issue here. I don't see my change action at this time. I can also review any members who will be associated with the route. At this point, it is just a single user. If I wanted my change action to also be attached, what I could do here is just left click and drag my change action into my route. This simple drag and drop procedure will add the change action to my content tab. So right now, all three of these objects and items in 3D Experience are completely interrelated with each other, which is what we want as we start making changes in SOLIDWORKS. To start out, I'm going to use my measure tool to verify the diameter of the hole, which is 7 millimeters, and then also the diameter of this hardware, which is 8 millimeters. That explains partially why we're getting some geometry overlap in that area. So as opposed to changing the hardware, which is usually standardized, I'm going to adjust the holes on the plate. To do that, I'm going to click on my Work Under icon over in the My Session app. I can then choose to work under a specific change action. That's going to make it so all the changes that I make are going to be tracked by 3D Experience. So I went ahead and opened up this plate, and the first thing I'm going to do is change the size of these holes. Now, if I try to keep this as the same hole type, I can see that none of the diameters are really matching 8 millimeters. So I'm going to change the hole type so that I can get the diameter that I need. I'm also going to choose a far side countersink. If I take a look at the far side countersink, it's not ideal. There's still a little bit of like a gap there that would be really difficult to manufacture. So I'm going to make use of a couple surfacing tools. So I offset those surfaces and I'm just going to extend them so they actually do extend beyond the face of that body. And we'll go ahead and run an intersection. So the intersect tool will allow me to exclude those little tiny volumes where there's essentially a gap. The surfaces that I created extended those faces to create a very nice countersink. And of course we can add cosmetic threads so that information still is in the part, knowing we're going to match up with the hardware itself. Once completed, I want to save all of these changes into 3D Experience. Notice that my Save button will specifically save under the change action as well. So all this information is getting written back into 3D Experience and specifically to my change action. When I go into my assembly, we'll want to run one more interference detection to verify that there are no interferences and I'm looking really good. I have two assemblies that I also want to upload into 3D Experience because there's changes made there. Again, this will allow me to lock the files as well as save them directly into my change action and back into my cloud space. Once everything has been uploaded, we'll then have an opportunity to unlock all of our components. The unlocking is not critical to the change action, but it is good practice once we know we're going to be done. Also because we're going to have some changes in maturity states and we don't want anything locked in case they're going to be affected. When I take a look at my change action inside of my web interface, I am now going to see some additional pieces of information. I'm going to see under my realized changes the list of files that I just uploaded. Saving under the change action really does automate this process. I now have a very good understanding of exactly what has changed during this process and what was affected to solve the immediate issue. So with our change actions, we saw how the change actions and issues work collaboratively. They are linked and interconnected, and also linked and interconnected with routes. A route was automatically created as part of the approval process for the change action. We utilize the Work Under option inside of SOLIDWORKS to automate the realized changes and load those into our environment. And as we mentioned, that route was automatically created, and we could have even changed it and modified it at this time as well. We are going to take a closer look at routes and approvals in this next section. We are going to go through finalizing the approval, seeing the automation of how these three items are going to update. So not just change actions and routes, but the issue as well. And we will be able to see the difference in maturity states for some of these different objects that we've been working in, as well as our files. If I take a look at my change action, I notice that my files, which did have those changes, are in a maturity state called in work. In order for us to utilize the route, we need these files to be in a different maturity state. We actually need them to be in the frozen maturity state. Partly is because we don't want anyone making changes to this before we can go through this approval. Now I'm still working under my change action in SOLIDWORKS. So here I'm going to choose those three components that had changes and I'm going to update the maturity state to be frozen. Again, this is a requirement of working with a route. Also, with the change action, we can't necessarily go from in work to released. We would need to bump it forward that one more step so the change action can move this into a release state when completed. once we have made this change, again, we may need to refresh our apps. The system does take a couple moments to index, but we will then see that these items are in the frozen maturity state. So we're in a very good position there and ready to take a look at the route and how the approvals work. So this approvals tab and the route we looked at earlier are exactly the same, and they are interconnected in that way. I can go ahead and double click on this task or on the box, and that's going to open up a panel on the right hand side. Now I can add a comment. Now think of this as an approval comment. You can make it as simple as approved or add more context. And there's a button at the top where I can approve the change action and the files and what has made. You can see I got a series of notifications that came in. Anybody related to the change action, the issue, or the route would have received those same notifications. We can even take a look at specifically what those notifications are really at any time. We see that the change action was promoted to approval. We can see that the issue process has been approved and requested, and that the route has been completed. So again, multiple items occurring at the very same time. I only had to approve one item, and we had several things that were just initiated. So my change action is in this in approval state. That automatically adjusted once the route was approved. I also want to mark the route as completed. So just because we approved it doesn't mean it's not open and active. I would want to still make that be a completed route. Once the route has actually been completed, again, we'll see a notification start coming through on that change as well. The route will be listed as completed inside of my approval section. And we will also be able to see how our issue is now inside of the in approval state. Our change action also was set to completed at that time. So again, these changes get pushed through these interconnectivity between these three particular apps. So we're seeing all these items being updated. I'm also going to mark my issue as completed. Right now, I'm going through and just making sure everything is fully closed out. Again, I'm kind of going through all the clicks here, but thinking of this in terms of a multi-user environment, you may have different people doing these different actions. But once everything is set to completed or released, we're actually in very good shape regarding all of those realized changes and everything that has occurred. So notice that our files have actually changed into the release state. That's something that we saw inside of the issues. We would have seen it in the change action. We can also see inside of our bookmark editor that the Modoni is now set in a release state, which means that the change action has completed successfully. At this point, we could also review the changes that we made inside of our 3D viewers, whether it's 3D markup or 3D play. We can drag our components into these viewers in order to see any of the changes. At this point in time, we wouldn't necessarily need that markup, but we're just showing the geometry there. So we saw how interconnected the routes, the change actions, and the issues are. This is a great way to really enforce review and approval steps using routes, and we do get full visibility to file and approval status through the interconnectivity of these three particular apps. We saw quite a bit of automation. Once that route was approved, the change action, the issues, all those items just really started getting pushed through and approved. I want to talk a little bit more about route templates. I want to go through a template example and then talk about the maturity and revision states of those route templates. Now, once you take a look at my interface here, my route that we saw previously is gone. That's like a one-off route. That's not something that would be repeatable over and over again. if you wanted to really standardize your process, you would want to make a route template. Templates can be utilized and referenced going forward. So creating a route template is similar to creating an original route. We'll give this a title, and we can then also give this a description as far as what type of approval process this would actually be. Now, our route base purpose is going to be approvals in this case. We can also choose what type of task edits can be done on this. Remember, the tasks are going to be how the approvals are set with those boxes. And we can also give the system some guidance on how to behave if a route is stopped and then restarted. Next is going into the tasks pane, and I'm going to expand this so I have more space to work in. This is where you actually set up the approvers and what this process is going to look like. Perhaps we are in a situation where we want to give more than one person the opportunity to approve something. That's ideal in a situation where maybe one person isn't available. So we're going to set up our first CAD approver, and we are required to enter in some instructions so that the approver has an idea of which tasks need to be accomplished in order for him to approve that. Under the assignee, I'm going to list that as myself in this example, and being a template, I'm not going to put a due date on here. The assignee can accomplish that. Once the first task is completed, I can make use of the plus signs to add additional tasks relative to the first one. Now, by clicking the bottom plus sign like I did, I'm actually adding something kind of in parallel with each other. So this is almost like an or statement, such as approver 1 could approve a document or approver 2. Again, this is ideal when one person may not be available. So I can link this into a second person as needed. And then maybe I want one last person to also take a look at the changes. Maybe this is like a quality approver or a management approver, someone who is going to verify a couple different types of options. So under instructions, maybe this person would also make sure that there's not going to be a quality issue or that there's not going to be a manufacturing issue. And this would be like the final say until the changes got approved. So this would be the second order. And again, you can choose a different user or a group for this third task. Right now, we could choose to save this as a draft. We could choose to add additional items as needed. But in our case, we can see that there's a draft kind of icon next to all of this. If we were to save it as a draft, this would not be active for anybody else at the company to use. They simply wouldn't see it as an option. This could be used for developing something more complicated. If you want it to be usable and active, it has to be set to released. So change, approvals, routes, they do have their own maturity state. You want to make sure that it would be released. Now, in an event that maybe down the line someone new is going to be an approver or there's a change to the approver process, the route template can actually be revision controlled. So if I know I'm going to make a change to this, I can say, hey, I want this template to be in a different revision because I'm making a change to it. This will go ahead and bump this to be revision 2, and the maturity state automatically goes back into draft. So as I open this, I can now go ahead and make additional changes. So in this case, perhaps instead of just having one manager approval, maybe I want to have a second manager approver. Similar to what we did previously, we'll go ahead and add that second option, adding in a second kind of manager approver in case the first person is unavailable. Again, setting up the title, entering the instructions. This is all very similar to what we had seen previously. Once we've made the assignee and entered all of the instructions, we can go ahead and apply this into our route. Once done, we'll want to save the changes and re-release this via its maturity state. This is now available for use again in the second revision. So with route templates, we saw that we can create our own templates to standardize more complex approvals. Routes are items that can be reused over and over and over again, and as we create things like change actions and issues, we can choose to reference these templates as opposed to doing like a one-off review or having to recreate these more complex approvals every time. Route templates, they can also be revision controlled for when processes change. Again, this is a great benefit. We can always see what the most current revision is, and we don't have to recreate templates every time there is a slight change in what we need. We covered quite a bit of information between creating issues, executing change actions, and then different types of routes, and how all of these three items are really interconnected that provide us with just tons of automation in managing our approvals inside of 3D Experience. So thank you so much for joining me for this third webinar. If you haven't seen the other two, again, please check those out. If you have any questions about what you've seen here, we're going to open the floor pretty quickly to some questions. But again, thank you for your time and your attention.